Okay, hi teacher. First of all, sorry for today class. I'm really having problems with my internet, and I decided to, use my phone data, and well, that doesn't work. I'm now outside of Paris, so I'm not with a good signal. I'm sorry. So here's my presentation. First, How Democracies Die is the book. Exposing Chapter 9, Saving Democracy by Levitsky and Stiblet. Well, my name is Francis Cortez, and this is for Professor Luis Romero. And how do you change? Okay, my agenda is first I'm going to talk about the authors, contextualization and relevance, main ideas, Trump as a phenomena, how U.S. democracy works, conclusion, and debate questions. First, about the authors. The authors of this book are Stephen Levitsky and Daniel Siblet, both PhD political scientists and professors of Harvard University. Levitsky is a PhD researcher focused on Latin America, political parties, party system, authoritarianism, democratization, and weak and informal institutions. He is author of How Democracies Die, Conservative Parties and the Birth of Democracy, Structuring the State, the Formation of Italy and Germany, and the Puzzle of Federalism. On the other hand, Siblet, also a PhD researcher, is focused on comparative politics, democracy, and democratization, as well as the politics and political history of Western Europe. He's author of Conservative Parties and the Birth of Democracy and How Democracy Dies. Here's a picture of both. Now I'm going with the contextualization and relevance. First, the context. This book was published in 2018, so the authors didn't see, well, now they see, but in the writing the book, didn't see now events like 2020 elections or the attack to the Capitolian by Trump supporters, and well, they didn't see it, but they kind of prevented or show it as a possibility in this text. So this is a very interesting point. Another context is the crisis in the U.S. and the European Union. The European Union is having a democratic crisis because the rise of anti-immigrant political parties, usually of far right, conservative, that's threaten the democratic institutions. On the other side, in the U.S. democracy, there's a different threat that's by the division of the population, and this division, well, by a religious and race themes. It's a very difficult problem that's dividing the population without no respect, that's attacking them between them, well, making this a problem for democracy and how they see each other without no respect. And third, it's an incorrect view of the problem. Well, uh, many of the part of this chapter, the authors specify, start like sharing a context or theory of someone, and then say like, no, this is not like that. This can need to be changed, or this is really seen in this form. We can say this because I don't know the statistics and this and that. So they are like correct and some general statements or beliefs of the people. And four, I have here a question that America's current crisis be part of a global wave of democratic blackslide, but lighting. Well, this is with a part of the incorrect view of the problem, and the authors said that no. Well, I'm gonna explain it before better, but they say no because even even though there's crisis of democracy in the U.S. and the European Union, If you see the number of democracies in 2005 and the number of democracies nowadays, the number hasn't changed really much. So there's not like you can say like there's a wave of democratic backsliding. It's more like the conditions for democratic to be healthy are now thought that before, and so it's how you state is not a wave of democratic backsliding. It's just the path, because as we see in this text, it is not by it could be. And now the importance. Under the crisis, problems and solutions. Understand the crisis, sorry. This is a really interesting chapter. First, because it helps you understand what are the bases of the US crisis in democracy and what are the possible solutions for the main parties in the for preventing a democratic interrupt. And another importance is that it prevents possible negative outcomes. As I said before, uh, this this chapter, this book, uh, like know things that could possibly pass on the future. So this is really helpful for people to understand and prevent this kind of problems, this kind of negative outcomes. And a third is that it set a path for future researchers. Well, this is a general book, not for specifically politicians, student, politicians, no, political scientists, but it makes the beginning of a path. First, for people who want to know more and get to know what's happening in the country with the democracy, and also for the political scientists to have like a general view of what happening and go well deeper on the theme. The main ideas. The main ideas is well, first that U.S. democracy system is vulnerable. For many people, they will say, well, this is obvious, but for many American people and well, in European and global citizens, is not that obvious. And this is because, well, US democracy is the oldest democracy and it has really strong structures and institutions that it will strengthen. However, it has nothing special or very different from other democracies. So this means that it can be sick by the same illness that attacks other democracies. So it's vulnerable and well, it can have the same problems that Venezuela have, that Turkey have, that country in Africa and the Middle East have. Well, taking this into account, one of the biggest challenge for democracy in the U.S. is the norm breaking. Norm breaking are the norms that are not written and well are practiced for the good of democracy. Well, in these recent years, these norms have been breaking by different political actors, and this has been a big challenge for democracy. That, well, I'm going to explain it better on the next slide. But for now, the next main idea is more than a statement. It's that U.S. foreign policy from 1989 to Obama was to promote democracy. What does it mean? That from the end of the Cold War until well before Trump, uh, U.S. foreign policy was to promote democracy, of course, where they don't have interests as Middle East, Russia, or China, but in places like Africa, Middle East, and Europe, they promote democracy by politics and policies and well advices from the government. Uh, we can see that in 1990 to 2015, is the most democratic century in the world history. This is a very interesting point because it can be justified by that in this period of time, the big powers were promoting democracy. The big powers around the world were going to the other countries to promote this kind of system. But all of this started changing because of this crisis of the European Union and US that are mainly these powers that promote this. By saying this, to 2015, we can uh, well look for what happened here, and it was well, Trump was coming, and Trump was a big threat for democracy because a president who threat the press, a president who threat the opposition, a president who doesn't respect their own citizens, well, is not a president of a democratic country. That's why US is no longer a democratic model, and that's one of the main ideas of this text. Last, extreme partisan division, mainly about racial and religious difference. That's why I say before, this is, well, what's making norm breaking. The norm breaking, it's support in this division on the view of racial and religious thoughts and difference. Well, of course, letters. This is just the main ideas here. Trump here. Trump during, well, we know what was before Trump was a time of democratic stability. During Trump, we can say that, well, he's the least pro-democratic president since Nixon. We have to remember what happened to Nixon, so it's not good news for democracies of the world and the U.S. And after Trump, the authors proposed three outcomes. First, a very good but less likely outcome is a swift democratic recovery. A swift democratic recovery, it stands for a losses in support for Trump. This means in elections or impeachment or in an impeachment. A really big lose in the elections will make a really help. Well, lose of Trump, of course, in the election will make a really helpful action for to democracy in the country. First, because it will push the Republican Party to cut lines, to cut communication with um, extreme politicians like Trump, because it will be a failure so big they well, they wouldn't like to repeat it, so they have to cut all of that, and well, taking out of the image people like Trump is really helpful for democracy, and this could change the way of inactions of the Republican Party, and they will probably try to communicate more with the Democratic because of their disadvantage, helping in a very big way the system, democratic system. And if it is impeach in this option, it has to be an impeachment with a big majority, not just like the minimum for being taken out of the office. It has to be a big majority acceptance of this impeachment. Because if not, well, it happens the third election, but we're not yet. And the second reason, the second scenario is that, well, Trump get reelected with wide national appeal. Well, this is very dangerous for democracy. Well, it doesn't happen. We know it. But it will have been an scenario where democratic institutions will get really harmed by a big, bigger division, even, well, for Trump and I don't know, and the Democrats trying to recover power. Well, everyone by looking at the classic norms of democratic institutions in the U.S. So if he get reelected with national white national appeal, he also